Welcome, foolish mortals, to another episode of the HitchHiking Hosts Show 101. I am your host, your ghost host, Wes Troop, and I'm back with another episode where we're going to talk about the history of an attraction. So, that sort of sounds like a old 90s erotic thriller, the history of attraction. Anyway, this has nothing to do with erotic thrills, at least I don't think so. Maybe you have a story about that, but we'll see. Anyway, we're continuing on down the road. The Wiz was just on tonight, we're easing on down the road, and we're Frontierland, going down the old dusty trail. We're back in 1955, Disneyland, when it first opened. This was one of the first attractions that opened. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk about, and actually we're going to talk about this and all the other riverboats in Walt Disney World, in Disneyland Paris, and in Tokyo Disneyland. But they all started with the Mark Twain Riverboat. One of the original plans for the first Disney amusement park that was scheduled to be built across the street from Walt Disney Studios in Burbank was a Mississippi steamboat ride. That park never came to fruition, however, as the company opted to make the much larger Disneyland instead. The idea for the steamboat attraction was still in the plans for Disneyland. Walt Disney decided to name the attraction after his personal hero, Mark Twain, whose real name was Samuel Langhorne Clemens, who was also a riverboat pilot when he was younger. That experience inspired his pen name, Mark Twain, which is a riverboat term that means a vessel is at safe depth. The Mark Twain would be the first functional paddle wheeler built in the United States in 50 years. The WED designers did extensive research to build it like the riverboats in the heyday of steam-powered ships. The decks were assembled at the Disney Studios in Burbank, while the 105-foot hull was constructed at Tom's Shipyards in San Pedro, California. While building the Mark Twain, Imagineers had to figure out how the ship would run. It would burn diesel fuel to heat its boiler, continuously heating water into steam, which is then routed to two pistons that would turn the paddle wheel. Spent exhaust would then be routed back to the boiler. The riverboat would be guided through what is now known as the Rivers of America by an I-beam track, which is hidden under the dyed river water. Joe Fowler, Disneyland's construction supervisor and a former Navy admiral, insisted on creating a dry dock for the ship along the Rivers of America. Walt Disney was not thrilled at how much space the dry dock would take up and referred to it as Joe's Ditch, and then later Fowler's Harbor, the name in which it goes by today. Walt did support the riverboat itself, though, funding its construction out of his own pocket when corporate funds fell short. The Mark Twain would draw only 18 inches of water, since the river is relatively shallow. At its deepest point, it is no more than 8 feet near the switch at Fowler's Harbor, where it resides when not in operation. The boat uses clean, fresh water from a tank on board to prevent contaminants from the water in the Rivers of America from fouling the boiler. On the first Fill the River Day at Disneyland, the water that was pumped into the Rivers of America actually soaked through the riverbed. Fowler quickly found a supply of clay to replace the soil stabilizer used to line the river, and thankfully, the second Fill the River Day was a success. The Mark Twain made her maiden voyage on July 13, 1955, a few days before the park officially opened, for Walt and Lillian Disney's 30th wedding anniversary. Before the party, as Fowler was checking to make sure everything on the boat would be ready for the 300 guests, he found Lillian sweeping the decks and joined in to help her. On Disneyland's opening day, July 17th, the Mark Twain was opened to take park guests around the Rivers of America. Actress Eileen Dunn, star of the movie Showboat, christened the boat with a bottle of water from many major American rivers, but had trouble breaking it across the Mark Twain's bow. Passengers boarded the 150-ton, 28-foot-high, 105-foot-long riverboat from the waiting area, which is made to resemble a real riverboat loading area, with cargo deliveries sharing space on the dock. Historic United States flags are displayed at the attraction's entrance. While boarding the Mark Twain, passengers are free to move around the 3 levels. The lower deck's bow has chairs. The upper deck provides a vantage point for viewing landmarks throughout the voyage. There are also a couple of bench seats on this level, some indoors and some outside. The wheelhouse where Mark Twain's pilot is stationed is also located on the upper deck. At the pilot's discretion, a small number of passengers may be given permission to ride in the wheelhouse for the voyage, after which they are presented with a souvenir pilot certificate. The lower level of the wheelhouse features a sleeping area and a sink to maintain the illusion of being in the captain's living quarters. The pilot signals the departure and arrival of the Mark Twain using a horn and bell system, along with signals to other rivercraft attractions. Because the riverboat travels along an I-beam guide rail throughout the ride, the pilot does not maneuver the ship. Instead, the pilot serves as a lookout for other river traffic, such as Davy Crockett's Explorer canoes and the rafts to Tom Sawyer Island, and communicates with the boiler engineer. The boiler engineer is stationed on the bottom deck towards the stern. This is where the throttle and reverser are located. From here, the boiler engineer controls the speed and direction of the riverboat. Steam from the boiler is used to power the paddle wheels and thus pushes the craft along its guideway. Voyage on the rivers of America around Tom Sawyer Island features pre-recorded narration by a riverboat guide voiced by Thurl Ravenscroft. Mark Twain, voiced by Peter Renaday, who speaks of his days piloting a riverboat, and by the quote-unquote captain of the ship, voiced by Stephen Stanton. The narration playback, operated by the pilot via a control panel in the pilot house, today points out such sites as the Haunted Mansion, Splash Mountain, Davy Crockett's Explorer Canoes Landing, Pirate's Lair on Tom Sawyer's Island, the Settler's Cabin, which used to be a burning settler's cabin but no longer is aflame, an Indian chief raising hand in welcome, let's hope that's what he's doing, an Indian village, Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, a sacred Indian burial ground, animals and abandoned mine cars, and of course Big Thunder Falls. There was a bit of a problem during the Mark Twain's first official voyage. When the crowd moved to one side of the boat to view a passing scene of the Indian encampment or other site, the boat would list from the side and water poured over the deck, as no one had determined Mark Twain's maximum safe passenger capacity. This caused the steamship to almost capsize on a voyage a few days later, when ride operators continued to wave on more than 500 guests on board until the deck neared the waterline. As the ship traversed the sparsely vegetated river route, it came loose from its track and got stuck in the muddy banks. Immediately, the park established a maximum capacity of 300 passengers, which remains in effect today. While it wasn't exactly smooth sailing at first, the Mark Twain worked out the kinks and has been a guest favorite for 60 years. During the first few years, you could buy a non-alcoholic mint julep while on board, as well as listen to card and checker players reenact dialogue of the times. Here, see, here's a card, see. Definitely not. Occasionally, the Disneyland band would play music on the lower deck bow to entertain the crowds. The Mark Twain Riverboat underwent a major refurbishment during the spring of 1995, where all the decks and the boiler were replaced. When the Rivers of America was drained in 2002, the boat was noted to have considerable hull damage. It underwent a refurbishment in 2004 to repair the hull, which included replacing the keel. For the park's 50th anniversary celebration in 2005, a new, more colorful paint job was applied to the attraction. On most days, the Mark Twain begins operation as soon as the park opens. On days when Fantasmic is being performed, the riverboat, which plays a role in the show, will close a few hours before showtime. On other nights, Mark Twain will be run through the evening, using a high-intensity rooftop spotlight to point out the sights, with the final trip beginning around 30 minutes before park closing. A sign at the loading area will list the day's last trip, so be sure to check it out. There are a few former sites that the boat passed along the river. The burning settler's cabin, which used propane to simulate burning, was one. The pipe that fed propane to the burner failed in the early 2000s and has not been relit. There were plans in 2007 to replace the failed feed and again have the cabin burn. However, the pirates' lair at Tom Sawyer Island changes affected these plans. As of now, the burn marks have been removed, the holes patched, and the area cleaned up. Along with the cabin, the Gully Whumper, one of Disneyland's extinct keelboats, is now scenery along the riverbank. A mine train from the old Nature's Wonderland attraction is also used as scenery. The mine train is on its original track and used to border Cascade Peak, a man-made fiberglass hill complete with a waterfall which was bulldozed in 1998. The train was removed in June 2010 for restoration. Also, one of the rafts to Tom Sawyer Island was marooned just in front of the no longer burning cabin and is now scenery. On January 11, 2016, looking into the near future here, the Mark Twain Riverboat, along with the other attractions and shows along the rivers of America, will close temporarily for the construction of Star Wars Land. Oh yeah. These attractions will reopen at a later date to be determined. The Magic Kingdom's version of the attraction is called the Liberty Square Riverboat, and at one time featured two riverboats. Admiral Joe Fowler, a stern wheel named for Disneyland's construction supervisor, and Richard F. Irvine, a stern wheel named for a wet executive. Admiral Joe Fowler opened on October 2nd, 1971, one day after the Magic Kingdom's opening, until the fall of 1980 when it was retired after less than 10 years of operation, and it got accidentally destroyed after falling from a crane onto its dry dock. Dope! Richard F. Irvine came into service on May 20th, 1973, but was renamed the Liberty Bell in 1996 after everything except for the hull, boiler, and engines was stripped off, and an all-new superstructure was constructed from aluminum and vinyl. No need to show us your superstructure. Disneyland Paris has two riverboats, the Mark Twain and the Molly Brown. Each riverboat features a recorded conversation between the captain and Mark Twain, or Molly Brown. Since the storyline takes place in the fictional town of Thunder Mesa, most of the spiel deals with the sights of Big Thunder Mountain, Phantom Manor, Wilderness Island, Smuggler's Cove, an old snoring fisherman, Yellowstone National Park geysers, dinosaur remains, and more. Their Mark Twain is based off of the Disneyland version, a stern-wheeler, while the Molly Brown is a side-wheeler, the only one in any Disney park. On May 16, 2005, Molly Brown's engine overheated as the boat rounded the corner at the back of the rivers of the Far West. Although there was no visible fire, smoke damaged the ship and her engines, rendering her immobile. Guests were ferried ashore by the River Rogue keelboats. The engine system was badly damaged, and the Molly Brown remained out of operation for many months, while Mark Twain's ongoing refurbishment at the dry dock was finished. In September 2005, Molly Brown was moved to the dry dock, and in March 2006, Mark Twain finally resumed operation from Thunder Mesa Riverboat Landing. However, it was not until September that Molly Brown's long refurbishment finally began, and what was completed in late April 2007. In 2010, it was decided that Molly Brown had to be rebuilt from scratch. On March 25, 2011, she was back in business with a new recording of Molly Brown's speech in English, which used to be in French. The Mark Twain hasn't operated since 2011 and has spent most of the time sitting in the dry dock. Tokyo Disneyland's Mark Twain Riverboat is so large, how large is it, that it's required by law to be registered. Its home port is listed as Urasawa. There we go. From the time of its opening until September 2006, its sponsor was Nippon Suzaya Kaisha. I'm sure I botched that. Sorry. No matter which park you ride it in, take a rest and journey around the sights of Frontierland for a slower speed attraction. Well, that's all the time for this show. I'll be back soon with another Hitchhiking Hosts 101. And we're almost done with Frontierland, and then we move on to Fantasyland, everybody. So look out for that. Until next time, don't forget to subscribe right here on YouTube. YouTube.com/HitchHostShow. If you're listening to the show, yeah, good for you. You get a gold star. If you'd like to listen to the show, you can find it on Podbean. It's hitchhostshow.podbean.com. And remember, every week I'm back with Disney Parks news, so look out for that every week on YouTube and on Podbean. You can also find it on Stitcher and iTunes if you search the Hitchhiking Host Show. And also, you can like the Facebook page, facebook.com/HitchHostShow. Follow on the Twitter and the Instagram at HitchHostShow. Until next time, don't forget to... Hurry back for the next episode. See ya.